This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Davidson with his own move. Carrington. North are in front.
Hello and welcome back once again to North Pod. We've done it. We have completed the undefeated season. We are the Premiers. Cruised to victory in the end in the AFLW Grand Final against Brisbane. The final quarter, you could virtually sit back and relax. It was, nearly done at that point, and certainly the second half of that last quarter, you could really just take in the fact that it was going to be a win, and we've won our first AFLW Premiership. Super excited. It was really cool to be there. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to make it, but was able to do so. It was an amazing experience. Makes us the first expansion team to win a premiership. Adelaide's won 3, Brisbane's won a couple, Melbourne and the Dogs have won a flag, but we're the first of the expansion sides to do it. And just a really special night, to be honest. When I was looking up who's won the past premierships, it was really interesting to see, because during the speeches, both Emma and Jazz and Crocs all talked about how Brisbane's been such an amazing AFLW side during the start of the competition, and they've made 6 out of a possible 8 grand finals. So it's a pretty remarkable record that Brisbane have. They've managed to win 2 of them. And I suppose, there was the COVID 2020 season in which they were eliminated from finals, so weren't going to be able to make it, but there wasn't a grand final that year, so you can call it 6 out of 8 or 6 out of 9, but whichever way you look at it, they've been an amazing benchmark, but we were just unstoppable in this game. It's so much to talk about. It's an interesting thing to reflect on, a premiership win. I've done a couple of season ends for the men's competition, and certainly this is a different experience. So I will shake the format up a little bit. We'll still go through the positives and the 5 stars, the match result, the story of the game, but certainly not a lot to talk about in terms of negatives. So it'll be a bit of a brushing past that, and we might have a look at each of the players that played and just their performance in the match, because there was just, so many players that played their role, did their parts, that contributed towards a grand final win. So we'll talk about that. Team selection, not really a lot to talk about. There were no changes, so unfortunately there's always those unlucky few that miss out, that are emergencies, that are so close. So Neve Martin, Lulu Puller and Eliza Shannon were the unlucky emergencies. All of them played this year. Martin in particular played about half the year, so it's just the way it goes, unfortunately, with Emma Kearney out. Britton had a couple of games out. That meant that there was a role for Neve Martin. We saw Puller and Shannon a couple of times during the year as well, but we were full strength, we were fully fit, and you've got to pick your best available side. So we did that. Obviously, there was probably a small question mark hanging over Emma Kearney, given she didn't play a lot of game time in the prelim, but as you will soon talk about, that was clearly just getting her feet wet. She was fully fit and had a massive impact on the game. So there was absolutely no mistakes at the selection panel here. It was a fantastic side, and everyone played their role or did their part in some way. If you've been underneath a rock and you need to catch yourself up with the match result, it was North Melbourne 6-3-39, defeated Brisbane 1-3-9. So a 30-point demolition, if you can call a 30-point win that. Brisbane were just completely defensively stifled. They had absolutely nothing offensively going. As soon as the ball went inside 50, there was just no options for them, really. Their only goal came from a bit of a mistake from us, which I'll talk about in a minute. But they just didn't look like scoring all night, and we looked dangerous every time we went forward. It wasn't necessarily our most convincing forward half display, but we looked far more dangerous than Brisbane when we did get it forward. We're more efficient and just got it forward more often, so created more opportunities and certainly created more opportunities where the ball was free flowing and not congested. A lot of the time when the ball did go inside 50 for Brisbane, we were able to get numbers around the ball and create stoppages and really stop their capacity to create running, free-flowing football. Whereas when we went forward and got in our forward half, oftentimes it was us through run and carry, going through the middle and creating one-on-one or two-on-two situations inside 50, which allowed our smalls to go to work, which they certainly did. O'Loughlin and Wall kicked 5 of the 6 goals. Tess Craven snuck forward for the other one. So it was the smalls that did the damage on the scoreboard, but as we'll talk about, the tools certainly had a big impact on the game as well. In terms of how the game went, I suppose it was the same as a lot of games this year where we got out of the blocks fast as possible. It was a little bit of a nervous start, I thought, for both sides, but I would have to imagine also that the ground was probably still a little bit wet underfoot, so particularly early on, I think as the ball got a little bit wet, the more time it spent out there, you could see a couple of fumbles, but certainly nothing too crazy. I think for the most part it was just some early game nerves. We were electric when we were able to get it forward, and we kept the Brisbane forward line really honest in that first quarter. Our first goal came when Tess Craven just crept forward, a quick kick, and she found herself, in acres of space, about 20 metres directly out in front of goal. That was just through sheer work rate and just knowing that her opposition's got sucked into the contest. Massive error there to leave, a player free that deep and that free inside 50. She had absolutely no one anywhere near her, so took the mark, went back and slotted it straight through the middle for our first goal. That was followed up pretty quickly by 2 Alice O'Loughlin goals that made life really hard for Brisbane in the first quarter. She was similar to the other small forwards in the side, just electric. I think I've used that word a couple of times already, but kicked a goal from a hand pass from Talia Randall that where she snapped truly. Kicked another goal where she took a mark from a quick kick forward. She just was invincible really in that first quarter. O'Loughlin absolutely showed what she'd been able to do all year. So really got out to a fast start. Emma Kearney was so excited to be back. She was taking the game on at every opportunity and dancing around her opponents, really getting the crowd involved. I thought the defensive group was really focused on shutting Dakota Davidson out of the game, and it worked early on. She did have an opportunity at the back where she dropped a mark she probably could have taken and wasn't able to then kick a goal. That was really the only chance that she got in that first half. We really just rotated Birch and Ferguson, and then at times right through her and just shut her completely out of the game. There was a lapse late in the quarter. Emma King clotheslined an opponent, probably a fraction late, or as she was kicking it. It got paid downfield. It was definitely a free kick. It's just whether or not it was a downfield free kick. That meant that Ellie Hampson had a shot for about 40 out, and it was a great kick, actually. Kicked the goal, so got Brisbane off the mark, or in terms of a goal at least. They had a point or two at that point. So that was disappointing. It gave them a bit of momentum going into quarter time, but all in all, you'd say that we had absolutely the momentum in that first quarter. And like I said, I think it was pretty fortunate to be paid downfield. I think it probably should have just gone back to the wing. And, if that's the case, maybe Brisbane don't score a goal, because as I discussed, that's their only goal for the entire game. From then on, it was just a bit of a war of attrition. We didn't, through quarters 2 and 3, there wasn't a lot of scoreboard action. We kicked a goal in the second. Brisbane kicked a point in the third, and that was it. So not a lot of scoring action through the middle part of that game, but some beautiful play that just didn't quite end up in goals. I thought Bruton had some really good play to set up Wall for the only goal of that second quarter, but there was some other build-up play that was really good. And defensively, like I said, just absolutely shut down Brisbane. Dakota Davidson didn't have a touch or a disposal, I suppose, to half-time. Had a couple of free kicks against and was looking, really frustrated. She was throwing her body around but not being able to have an impact. We went into half-time 25-8 up, so looking really strong. And whilst the game wasn't done at that point, it was really hard to see how Brisbane would be able to get back into it, because we were just dominating them across all 3 lines. Really, our forward line was looking far more dangerous. We were winning the midfield battle with Garner and Riddell just accumulating And when the ball did go inside, like Sarah Wright was having an amazing game. Kearney, like I said, was fantastic. And Birch and Ferguson were just positioning themselves really well to shut out any of those tools from Brisbane having any impact. So, yeah, it was a great feeling at half-time. Like I said, in that premiership third quarter, just one rush behind to Brisbane. So it became a bit of a contested game at this point. There was a lot of repeat stoppages. Not over and over and over again. It wasn't a super high stoppage game, but certainly the third quarter, it did slow down a little bit as we tried to junk it up a little bit and really make sure that Brisbane weren't able to score. That being said, there was still some really strong build-ups that were just missing that final kick. I thought Sheila was a great outlet coming off out of defensive 50. She took a couple of marks. Kearney just kept taking the absolute piss coming out of half-back. She had a brilliant 1-2 with Sarah Wright that hit O'Loughlin. O'Loughlin then she should have just gone back and tried to kick her third, but tried to go short to Sheila and missed the target, but it was a fantastic build-up. Craven took a really good intercept mark. We were just missing those finishing touches on some of our work in that third quarter, but you could see that we were just building up the pressure and, like, I guess, shutting Brisbane out from any opportunity of scoring. And then the final quarter, I mean, it's probably an exaggeration to say we broke the damn walls because it was just the 2 goals. It's not as though it was an avalanche, but I think the first of those goals essentially put a stamp on things and made it really ours to lose at that point. Bruton and Craven, again, some massive moments. Bruton had a beautiful kick to Vicky Wall, who finished with a goal to all but seal the game, like I said. And then Alice O'Loughlin won quite a petty free kick, I thought, for a sling tackle, but you'll take it given the fact that I think it was Randall was penalised for one maybe 5 minutes earlier inside our 50. I thought neither of those really were sling tackles. There was certainly a bit of a pull sideways or a turn, but I don't think they were particularly aggressive. Anyway, they were both called, and O'Loughlin's was certainly more a damaging one to win because she was essentially directly in front and kicked her third goal, which definitely sealed the game. The last 5 minutes, it was just, soak it in. You could see, the coaching staff came down to the ground a few minutes early. You could see all the players on the bench were celebrating in the last few minutes. The crowd was singing and getting involved in that last quarter. It was just, a really surreal moment to be winning a premiership for North Melbourne. I really just enjoyed soaking it in because that last quarter there was, like I said, there wasn't a lot of tension. There wasn't any feeling that Brisbane were going to get back into it. It was quite different to the qualifying final that I was at where we played Adelaide, where there was this sense that maybe Adelaide could mount a fight back, and it was only the last minute or so that the game was completely done. This was a far more relaxing affair where we just looked so comfortable and confident. And there was just so many moments where players stepped up and just did that one thing that they needed to stop Brisbane's run. Whereas, I think in other games, like the 2 against Adelaide, we have made a couple of mistakes and kind of let them back in, which has allowed the games to be a little bit closer against them. But this is the second time we've really pushed away from Brisbane this year and just punished them. So that's, I guess, how the game transpired. Just an amazing game to watch. In terms of the story of the game, I guess I've talked about how it happened, but put simply, our game plan just worked perfectly. Went off without a hitch. Davidson was completely shut down. She was the one that I was nervous about. She's such a strong player, and we all know the impact that she had on the grand final last year, and there are some concerns that we are slightly undersized in defence, but like I said, didn't have a touch or a disposal to half-time, finished with 2 touches, and after dropping that mark early inside 50 in the first quarter, just never looked dangerous. She did try and throw her weight around, but it didn't work for her. I thought that Birch and Ferguson mostly blanketed her. Sarah Wright would take some of those responsibilities when Davidson pushed a little bit further up the ground, but the 3 of them just made sure that it wasn't happening for her, and an absolute team defensive masterclass from those 3 in terms of locking up the tool. And then, obviously we had O'Shea and Bresnahan, at times some others rolling through there to make sure that when the ball hit the ground, we were able to get out of it. Kearney, of course, off half-back. I think in the middle of the ground, Garner and Riddell just dominated the middle. Between them, 64 disposals, 9 marks, 20 tackles, 14 clearances, 8 inside 50s. So for your 2 main midfielders to be doing that kind of damage on grand final day, speaks volumes to the fact that they stood up and, just weren't able to be stifled. Whatever Brisbane wanted to do at stoppage or wanted to try and do to limit their impact, it just didn't work. They were both immense, and I think the fact that they worked in tandem, Garner was really, really in tight and working the contested football, whereas Riddell was that next link in the chain, a little bit more outside, and the two of them worked beautifully together. I talked about the tall forwards playing their role beautifully, even though it was the small forwards kicking the goals. Sheila as that lead-up option, either at half-back or even on the wing, she was super important. And Randall was that punisher a little bit deeper, just putting pressure on the players with her tackling, her bumping. Like I said, had the handball off to kick our second goal through Ellis O'Loughlin. But the two of them just did their jobs beautifully, with Emma King floating through there at times as well. And then our smalls were our weapons in the forward half. Whilst Bella Eddy wasn't able to get her game going, Wall and O'Loughlin were just... they couldn't be stopped. And even Bruton, probably a little bit more of a high half-forward role for her, but her ability to get the ball inside 50 and hit targets was fantastic. So, yeah, Wall kicked 2 goals and was unlucky not to have a third. She hit the post. O'Loughlin did kick 3 in the end and probably should have had 4 if she'd gone back and kicked one when she tried to pass it off. Between Wall and O'Loughlin, they had 15 tackles, so were just absolutely frenetic when the ball did hit the ground and didn't let the Brisbane defenders get any possessions lightly. Yeah, we were able to get the ball fast through the corridor, and when we did that, we scored. It was a sight to behold. I heard the Brisbane coach, Starcevic, talk about the fact that first half was the best footy he's seen, and I think, I'm sure from his perspective, watching his side try to negate it, I can totally understand that, because some of the quick hands and the finding players in space, the contested marking was just, like I said, the game plan worked exactly as we would have intended for it to, and that's how we ended up with this really comfortable grand final win. It just all came together, and I think watching, someone like Emma Kearney, who we've missed since the first third of the season, you sort of forget what you get with her, because whilst we've had O'Shea and Bresnahan and at times Tess Craven coming off half-back, it made such a significant difference to have Kearney doing that, because she just wrong-footed her opponent so many times, got 15 metres running the ball, and then was able to hit targets by foot after that. Whereas I think some of our other rebounding defenders, you're getting one or the other. You're either getting a really nice ball that's hit the target like Tess Craven, or you're getting O'Shea doing a lot of running but maybe not as accurate with the kick. So I'm nitpicking here, but I guess what I'm trying to say is all these things came together because we were able to get that running and carry back from Kearney, which we've missed, or to some extent we've probably forgotten that we've missed it because things have just been going so well for us. It'd be a bit different if Carnes was out and we weren't able to get the wins. So yeah, it just all came together in a fantastic performance. I'm going to go to the 5 stars now, the North Podium. We all know that Jazzy Garner is a runaway winner for the season, and it was hard to go past her for best on ground. I honestly don't know how, or I do know because I've done it, but when I was trying to come up with it, it was a real battle to try and narrow this down to 4. So no doubt there are several other players that are definitely deserving of votes, but that's the way it goes. But yeah, Jazzy Garner has to be best on. 35 disposals, which is a phenomenal effort. You have to remember this is a shortened game. It's a grand final, and to have 35 is a superhuman effort. 13 tackles, 10 clearances, 467 metres gained, a goal assist, 4 inside 50s, 8 intercepts to go with all of that offensive work, 22 contested possessions. So like I said, her and Riddell were kind of yin and yang in that way. She was the contested ball, getting it out from stoppage or tackling the Brisbane players that were trying to exit. If there was something happening in tightening close, she had her gloves all over it. She got the ball forward with meterage consistently, which we know is just, it's what she does. She clamped down on the opposition when they were trying to exit stoppage. She just didn't allow them, if the ball happened to fall their way, she just didn't allow them any easy disposals or any space to try and get away from stoppage and get the ball forward for Brisbane. Like I said, she intercepted those disposals that were under pressure from Brisbane, so she kind of set off the contest at times, and that's how she ended up with the 8 intercepts. And as always, I think that the big thing with her is she used her hands to actually give teammates time and space. It wasn't just quick hands to space and then figure it out. She was able to get people in space in the right positions and have a massive impact that way. So a deserving best on ground officially she was. She got the best on ground medal, which I think was super deserving. We saw that she got snubbed again, so to speak, in the best and fairest awards during the week, which I'll touch on at the end. But yeah, you couldn't snub her based on this performance. She was just clearly the best midfielder and was involved in so much of that grunt work and getting the ball forward. So I think it was pretty hard to have anyone else as best on ground. But after that, it does get a little bit trickier. I think for me that the 3 votes had to go to Sarah Wright. 20 disposals, 7 marks, 9 intercepts, 6 1%ers, 100% game time. And this was just a quintessential halfback game from Sarah Wright. If there was a dangerous ball to be won, she did it. And literally looked like she was playing with her mates in the park in that first half. She was so composed, just casual and effective, didn't worry about what the opposition was doing, wasn't rushed at all, just made the right decision every time. I'm sure that she won't get necessarily all the plaudits from the wider media. It's not necessarily a flashy role that she plays all the time, but I just thought that her impact on the game, particularly in the first half, when the game was there to be won, she did all the right things and just was so important in intercepting those tough balls. She put her body on the line at one point. Dakota Davidson cleaned her up because she went back with the flight. Yeah, she had a super impactful game, and it was a game that I think probably shows that she should have been in that All-Australian. Again, I'll touch on that from during the week. She was in the squad but didn't quite make the side, but you can't tell me that wasn't a special performance off halfback. She wasn't just negating, she was also propelling us forward. And like I said, making really cool and calm decisions and setting us up going in the right direction. So for me, definitely the best defender on the ground in terms of her defensive work, because her impact in that area was immense. And then the 2 votes probably alongside Sarah Wright, Emma Kearney was also playing off the halfback, but her offensive impact from there was fantastic. 23 disposals, 4 marks, 393 metres gained, 3 inside 50s, 8 intercepts, and yeah, I mean, welcome back, captain. Flashy but impactful is what I would say her game was about. Like I mentioned earlier, she wrong-footed her opponents a couple of times, would run 15 metres, then kick it and hit a target. Just an amazing return from her. Eased back in last week and then produced that on the bigger stage. Took the game on, didn't get burned once. I don't think there was a single time where she took the game on and backfired, because that's going to happen from time to time. We saw that from her a couple of times earlier in the year where she tried to get something going but it wasn't quite there and she'd get caught. It didn't happen in this game at all. She just, like I said, got wrong-footed her opponent, took some meterage and then hit up a target further up the ground. I just think, a real performance to remember after having to watch from the sidelines for a long part of the season, to come back in last 2 games of the year and have that impact on a grand final is fantastic. I thought a super important role that she played off halfback, because she gave us that spark and made sure that when the ball was going forward for us, it was either directly to our advantage or it was going deep where we could put our small forwards to work and put some pressure on the Brisbane defenders. So, 2 votes to Carnes and then 1 vote Ellis O'Loughlin. It was between her and Vicky Wall, but I think the extra goal just gets Ellis across the line. 11 disposals, 3 goals, 8 tackles, 4 of those were inside 50. And you just can't go past 3 goals in a grand final. Like I mentioned before, it could have been 4 if she hadn't tried to pass it off to Sheila in the third quarter. Just looked likely to score every time the ball came her way. Her spark in the first quarter was a massive deciding factor in getting the game going our way early on. Capped off just an amazing All-Australian season. 19 goals from 13 matches for Ellis. She did miss the 1 game with suspension, so that's why it's 13, not 14. Such an exciting young talent, and the fact, she had a bit of a quieter qualifying final against the Crows, but her last 2 games, the grand final and the prelim, she really stepped up and had that scoreboard impact that we saw her have, particularly in the first half of the year. The tackling pressure was what won her one of her shots. Just an amazing player and always looks likely. So, Ellis O'Loughlin the 1. So just to go over that, that's Jazzy Garner 4, Sarah Wright 3, Emma Kearney 2, and Ellis O'Loughlin 1. I think that's probably the best way it sits for me. I'll touch on the best opposition player. Ellie Anderson had 25 disposals, 14 tackles, 6 clearances, 6 intercepts. Tried her darndest around stoppage, was busy trying to negate our mids, but just didn't have enough mates coming along for the ride with her. And honestly, that's about as much time as I want to invest in that, because it's not really about the opposition in this one. So in terms of what that means for the final North Podium standings for the AFLW season, as we know, Jazzy Garner, well out on top, actually finishes with double the votes of anyone else on 46. So after Riddell and her went, pretty neck and neck for the first part of the year, Garner has just blitzed the field after that, 46 votes. Ash Riddell, 23 in second place. And then Alice O'Loughlin's 1 vote actually gives her an outright third position on 12 votes for the season. Just pips Kate Sheelaw on 11. And then after that, Sarah Wright, Libby Birch, and Bella Eddy had 6. Talia Randall, Mia King, and Emma Kearney had 5. Vicky Wall and Ruby Tripodi had 4. Gat 3, and Craven and O'Shea 2. And like I mentioned earlier, there were so many players that are honestly pretty unlucky not to score votes in this game. It was a really, really even team performance, but that's how I saw the best 4 at least. So let's go to the negatives. This is going to be as the fastest it's ever been. We did struggle with territory a little bit early on. I thought Brisbane had a bit more of the territory battle in the first quarter and a bit. Didn't matter though, because we hurt them on turnover, so we scored our best goals that way. It was a bit of a shame that Emma King gave away that dubious downfield free kick. It probably wasn't there. I think it was just a free kick, but it gave the Lions their only goal. So, that's unfortunate that we did concede that 1 goal that way. And then the only other negative is there's no next week, because the season is over. We'd just love to keep this momentum up and, go back to back. Let's play grand finals for the next 6 weeks, because I think we're probably going to win the next 6 matches. So there's your negatives. That's all that there is to talk about. Let's talk more about the positives in this game. I mean, I'm going to go player to player, but I just want to start off with a beautiful set of numbers. We just dominated pretty much every facet of the game. We had 108 more disposals, 17 more inside 50s. We were 10% more effective with our disposal. So, that goes a long way to showing why we were able to transition the footy so effectively. We were 9% more effective inside 50. So our efficiency was 24% to their 15%. Still not a super high number for us, 24%, but the fact that we were able to limit them to 15 speaks volumes about the way that our defenders were able to shut down any opportunities that Brisbane had. Had 11 more clearances, 39 more marks, 6 marks inside 50 to 1, 6 contested marks to 2. So just a dominance by any measure, those statistics, and really showed pretty much every area of the game where we were able to get on top and not allow Brisbane to do what they were trying to do. We'd lost the tackle count, so I guess you could you see that as a negative, but I think the fact that we had 108 more disposals speaks to the fact that we just had so much more of the ball and therefore not as many opportunities to tackle. We just strangled them. So let's get into talking about all the other players. I've gone through Garner, Wright, Kearney, and O'Loughlin, so I'm not going to cover them again. I probably should have mentioned that Wright also had a really big holding the ball tackle call in the first quarter that I thought really got the game going our way as well. So that was another big moment from her. I will touch on some big moments from some other players as we go through them, but yeah, I've probably spoken about those four enough. So let's go through everyone else. Ash Riddell, definitely unlucky to miss in the votes, but was just, like I said, immense around stoppage alongside Garner. Really clean. At one point, she collected a handball receive at one-handed and then just calmly spun around and kicked it down the line. Just looked a class above on the outside, whereas Garner was playing more on the inside, and the two of them worked really well in those roles. Had 29 disposals, 7 marks, 7 tackles, so did plenty. And like I said, I think crucially was that next link in the chain. Wasn't necessarily the one getting it in tight like she can sometimes. She's a very flexible player. But on this occasion was playing more of that outside role and a link in that chain to get the ball forward. So she had a really, really strong performance. Backed up the fact that she nearly won the AFLW Best and Fairest, finished second, which I'll talk about a little bit at the end of the pod. So a fantastic game from her. I mentioned her earlier on as well, but Vicky Wall just capped off an amazing final series. After only kicking multiple goals once this year in the home and away season, in round one, in fact, she's kicked 3 in a prelim and 2 in a grand final, and nearly had 3 in the grand final as well. Had 17 tackles across her three finals games, so just a massive final series from Vicky Wall. Like I mentioned, nearly had a third goal with a long bomb, but I think the thing that made her game so impressive was her tackling pressure. She had a lot of rundown tackles or rundown pressures that created turnovers, so she was massive, a super powerful player, and just love the fact that she's just got such a no-nonsense approach. Doesn't seem to be a lot of ego about her. She just goes about her business and finds the next contest to win. So, yeah, Vicky Wall had a fantastic game, and like I said, just an amazing final series to essentially play her best footy at the pointy end of the year. So amazing to have her back, the Irish woman. Amy Smith on the wing, a typically workhorse-like performance, like nothing flashy, but did the hard stuff. 20 disposals, 3 marks, 4 tackles, 3 inside 50s. So a fantastic stat line, and I just don't think was beaten in the contest all night. Just toiled away, a super important role holding down that wing as a more defensively minded player. But the fact that she was still able to have 20 disposals, I think, speaks to the fact that she was, able to get her game going in both directions. A couple of really good corrals and chases when the ball did go out loose towards the wing. She was, part of a couple of contests running down there. So a really important game from Amy Smith. Emma King, look, she did make the error with her clotheslining effort on the Brisbane player that cost us the goal, but had some big moments, took some really important intercept marks, couple of contested marks, had 16 hit-outs and 12 touches. So, look, she was in and out of the game, but what she did was really important, and she did what she's done all year. She competed in the ruck. She was a target at times in the forward line, and then she drifted back to fill some holes and like I said, took some really important contested intercept marks. So one was definitely deep inside 50, and I think another one might have been a bit higher up the ground. But on both occasions, she just, allows us to set up, takes the mark and allows us to set our game up going forward. So a super important role. The fact that we have 2 really competent rucks playing in the same side is such a blessing. I guess let's talk about Kim Rennie since we're talking about the rucks. 12 disposals, 22 hit-outs, but what I loved about her game was, for a ruck, she just took the game on. At one point in the last quarter, she was masquerading as a midfielder, I thought. She took an intercept mark, then bit off a really good dart inside. Can't remember who she hit with that ball, but then she ran on further inside, made a nice little Asphodel-like run, and then took the mark further up the ground again inside, and then ran on a little bit and kicked it inside 50. She could do it all, Kim Rennie. So you don't get that from many rucks. I thought it was a fantastic performance from her alongside Emma King, and the two of them were just a fantastic combination. The hit-outs were relatively even. It wasn't a domination in the hit-outs, but certainly the clearance game was a dominance by us, and you've got to have some competent ruck people in there doing that. So, yeah, both King and Rennie, I think, did their jobs in the ruck. Taylor Gatt probably had a quieter game by her standards, 12 disposals, 4 marks, 5 tackles. I think it probably took a little bit of time for her to find her feet. It was the intensity and the pressure was high early on, and I don't think she necessarily struggled, but I do think she found it harder to get herself involved in the game. She took a really big, important mark late. Like I said, everyone kind of had a moment where they were able to stand up, and there was a mark that she took where it was a really high swirling ball, and she kind of half ran back with the flight and took a semi-contested mark, which I thought was really important. There were so many moments throughout the game where Brisbane would fumble marks like that, and we just didn't do that. We for the most part, were really clean with our marking and our disposal. I think, like Amy Smith, the wings aren't always, going to be rewarded, but I thought she had some really good unrewarded running. She did her job, kept her shape, and like I said, not necessarily her most impactful game, but certainly not a bad game by Taylor Gatt at all. She was an important link in the chain and created space for others. Mia King, is that third fiddle in the middle, as I like to call her. A quieter game, 19 touches, 6 clearances. So if that's a quieter game, I think we're going okay. Like Taylor, not her best game for the year, but I definitely think played her role and allowed Garner and Riddell to do the bulk of the damage. She's a fantastic contested player as well, Mia King, and I thought, that didn't necessarily lend itself to the way that we want to play in this game. But like I said, as a third fiddle, I thought she was, good enough and could certainly hold her head high based on the impact that she had. Tess Craven is one that I think is another unlucky not to get a vote. She had just a game of really special moments. Kicked the opening goal, like I said, took several really tough, significant intercept marks, and was just composed all night. So it wasn't necessarily a high possession game, but every possession she had was impactful and important. 11 disposals, 1 goal, 5 marks, went at 91% disposal effectiveness. So, didn't waste possessions. And whether she was on the wing or at halfback, she played most of the game on the wing. She played both of those extremely well. And those marks were super important. A couple of times she really went back with the flight and took really brave marks where she wasn't really sure what was coming the other direction. So, yeah, massive impact game from Tess Craven, and definitely could have found herself in the votes. Nicole Bresnahan, 13 disposals, 4 marks, played part of that really strong defensive system. Took the game on a couple of times with her run and carry off halfback, so certainly did her thing. Like Taylor Gatt, wasn't a high possession game, but that's generally not what Bresnahan does. And I think what's been required of her this year has been a little bit different to in the past. She hasn't necessarily had the ball in her hands as much as I saw her have it last year, but she hasn't needed to because we've had other players doing that off halfback, and she's been able to play more of a lockdown role, or more of a balanced role, I suppose, where it's not all out attack. She's defending and attacking. And I guess part of that is that Libby Birch coming in, everyone's kind of shifted down a little bit. So Wright's been able to play more of a looser role, and that's allowed Bresnahan to do less of that rebounding. So yeah, just played her role, Bresnahan. I couldn't complain, and I did like the way that she took the game on a couple of times and ran the ball out of defence. Ruby Tripodi, 11 disposals, 4 tackles, 2 clearances. Probably similar to Mia King, played a good support role in the middle, did enough to suggest as a young player she's got a really bright future on the big stage. Had an important kick forward that led to Randall's handball to O'Loughlin for that first goal. So had a couple of important moments. She did have a fumble on half forward at one point. I think Bruton might have shot her a really quick hand pass, and she was just a little bit too quick for her. But holistically, a really good game from Ruby Tripodi, and I've just seen massive growth from her this year. I thought that she had a really promising final series. This probably wasn't her strongest game in the final series, but like I said, when you've got Riddell and Garner doing what they were doing in the middle, not everyone's going to have a starring role, so she definitely played her role. Jenna Bruton, I think, probably played her most impactful game of the year. Just so happy for her. It was a true redemption after her injury in last year's grand final. Would have been absolutely gut-wrenching to, essentially play about a minute's worth of footy in a grand final. She came out and just had a super impactful game. 12 disposals, 4 tackles, 2 goal assists, 3 inside 50s, and everything she did resulted in a net positive. Whether that was crafty kicks out of defence that gave us a chance to reset, whether that was kicking to dangerous spots for Vicky Wall to mark it, or those chains through the middle of the ground that ended up in kicks inside 50. Just another one that was unlucky to miss out on a vote because she was just so clean. Everything, like I said, everything that she did was a net positive. She didn't waste a possession at all. And yeah, I think it was her best game, or certainly her most impactful game for the year. Couldn't come at a bit of time because yeah, she is a big game player, and I think the fact that she's got that flexibility to her as well is massive. Essentially playing a half forward role, but an extra midfielder, a high half forward role, if you will. A perfect role for her. So she was absolutely immense. Erica O'Shea, probably similar to Bresnahan, did what was required off half-back without showing off too much of her run and dare. There wasn't one of those runs off half-back where she just took a couple of bounces and left someone for dead, but there wasn't really the need for that or the opportunity for it. 9 disposals, 4 intercepts, and didn't make a mistake, which is half the battle when you're in defensive 50. So, look, an unremarkable game from O'Shea, but again, if you're playing your role, you can't have everyone playing a starring role. So I thought that she was good. Kate Sheelaw, probably an underrated game, or one of those games where the stats sheet doesn't do justice to the impact that she had. She had 7 disposals, 5 marks. One of those was contested, but I think as that target higher up the ground, she was really important structurally. Whether that was her marking at half back when it was a quick kick out of defensive 50, or if we'd transitioned it a little bit and she was taking a mark on the wing, or at least making a contest and bringing it to ground. She wasn't outmarked. She read the ball really well through the air, and as she regularly does, she went back for the last few minutes of some of those quarters to ensure that we didn't concede, and similarly didn't make a mistake back there. A super, super important role despite the lack of scoreboard impact for her in this game. And we've seen this year that she's had games where she's been able to have some massive impact. This game wasn't that for her, but that's totally fine because structurally she was so important in us transitioning the ball from one end to another. So, like I said, not a game that the stats sheet jumps out, but she had a really big impact in terms of what she was able to do with those disposals, in particular her marking contest work. Libby Birch, I've spoken about a little bit. She defaulted to Davidson at times, but it was definitely a shared role throughout the night. Ferguson and Wright rotated through her a little bit. Had 11 disposals, a couple of intercepts, but was always communicating with Jazz Ferguson about where to be, and they played that goalkeeper role really well when there was a stoppage in defensive 50. So, yeah, it wasn't necessarily as a standout like she has been in some of the other matches later in the year, but fulfilled her role and was part of that team that shut down the Brisbane forwards. So you've got to give her a pass and a tick for that. Talia Randall, I spoke about her earlier. 8 disposals, 2 marks, 4 tackles, 3 of those inside 50. Had a goal assist. And just the quintessential Talia Randall unselfish game. She was the deepest target a lot of the time. Gave the handball off to O'Loughlin for a goal and played her role beautifully. Just sums up her year. She tackled really hard. She applied that physical pressure when the ball hit the ground, and wasn't too worried about who was going to, finish up with the goal, because ultimately she's that team player that makes sure that everyone else is getting what they need to. So, yeah, like Sheila, not necessarily stats that jump off the page, but her role in the structure was super important, and her body work when the ball hit the ground I thought was really important. Jazz Ferguson, I mentioned her a little earlier, 8 disposals, 5 marks, 1 of those contested, couple of intercepts, and as previously noted, just took a chunk off Dakota Davidson's role, took a really important or massive intercept mark late in the game, just to prove she can do it. The game was won at that point, but she just wanted to make sure that she'd had her moment, and she certainly did. She was outmarked early, and I didn't love that as a positive sign, but after that, I think was faultless. Didn't miss a target all night when she was required to dispose of it, went on 100%. Didn't come off the ground at all either, like Sarah Wright. So just chalk it up as another defensive masterclass by the backs. I think as a collective, you couldn't score them any higher because they just really didn't make a mistake defensively all night. And then the final player, Bella Eddy, it wasn't her night, but that's often the way as a small forward. When Vicky Wall and Alice O'Loughlin are getting it done, Eddy doesn't necessarily need to. And, she can live off her quarterfinal performance for as long as she likes, to be honest. It was still a monumental effort. She was a big part of the reason that we won that qualifying final. And, she was still able to show her class late with a couple of link-up plays on the wing. When she was able to find the ball, I thought she was good. She just had quite a game in terms of finding the footy. So, yeah, not her night, but again, doesn't matter so long as a couple of those smalls are getting involved. It's not necessarily going to be everyone getting their bite at the cherry. But yeah, there's your summary. A near perfect team performance in terms of the girls just playing their roles and supporting each other to be elite. I think it was really hard to find significant errors or mistakes in their games. There was just so much to like about the way that they played as a team, and I guess that's what's going to happen when you come together in a grand final and win so convincingly. So that is your 2024 AFLW Premiers right there. Like I said off the top, a really amazing experience to be there. It's a little unnerving as a North supporter to be in the majority of the fans, but it was just such a wonderful atmosphere to be with some people that the men's program has not been successful of late. It's been hard to follow them and support them when you're watching so many losses, and to have this breath of fresh air that is the women's program, to have Darren Crocker at the head of it, and just a bunch of really likeable girls, playing their guts out. Just, special to watch. And in particular, given how heartbreaking it was to lose the grand final last year, to come back and have an undefeated season. God, I wish we'd beaten Geelong and we could actually say we won every game. It's, you can essentially say that by saying we were undefeated. We didn't lose all year. And it's just as sweet. It obviously in the big picture doesn't mean anything at all because we won the premiership, but it would be that little extra bit of cherry on the 17 cherries that are already on the cake, I guess. I spoke about, moving on from the game itself, I spoke about the AFLW awards that were on during the week. I'm going to whip through this. It kind of feels less significant now that we've gone on to win the grand final because, whilst the individual awards are great, it's not what we're about. So I spoke about it before. Ash Riddell did finish second in the count on 20 votes, 3 away from Ebony Marinov, who from Adelaide was pretty dominant. She had finished on 23. As per usual, Jazzy Garner, somehow the umpires didn't spot her, particularly early in the season. She did come home a lot stronger, but she didn't poll in the first 4 games, which is just baffling to me. I think there's definitely some votes for her in those first few rounds that have somehow gone missing. In any case, she did finish on 12 votes, Jazzy Garner, so it was second place for us, and I think maybe 8th in the overall standings. It was ironic in the end that Garner actually scoring some votes was robbing Ash Riddell of the chance to actually win it, but that's what's going to happen when you're in such a strong side. You're going to take votes off each other. Marinoff didn't have as strong competition in the Crows midfield, at least. There's certainly some good tools at Adelaide like Randall and Gould, but not necessarily someone that's going to take the votes off her in the middle of the ground. So Marinoff is a worthy winner. It's tough when the season's so short and we're in this place where there's quite a density of elite players, if that makes sense. Like there's a big batch or a medium-sized batch of really elite players that are always going to poll well, and then a batch below that are not. So if you're in a strong side with more of those elite players, it is harder to get these individual accolades. And in any case, across the 11 home and away games, we only missed a total of 8 possible votes. So a pretty dominant performance from us. Riddell was 20, Garner 12, Emma Kearney and Kate Sheila 6, or Alice O'Loughlin 6 as well, but she was ineligible but due to her suspension. Mia King 4, she had 4 games where she got the 1 vote, which probably shows her consistency and where she's at. Jenna Bruton 2, and then Eddie and Taylor Gatt 1 each. So pretty dominant performance from the team as a whole. We did have 9 total vote getters and 10 out of the 11 possible best on ground performances. It was just the Geelong game that we didn't get the best on ground winner. Riddell had 5 of them, Garner 2, O'Loughlin 2, and Sheila 1 in terms of the breakdown of those best on ground performances. So just the usual. I don't like Jazzy Garner's not going to be bothered by it, but unfortunately it is what it is. The same night the All-Australian was announced, so at least Garner got the recognition there. So she was captain, and she was in the side with Ash Riddell and Alice O'Loughlin. So 3 players in the side. Like I alluded to earlier, I think pretty unlucky not to have Sarah Wright as a defender representing us. But I get that it's only 20 odd in the side, so you can't fit the entirety of the North Melbourne side in there. Although that would make for a very strong side nonetheless. We had 3 in the team. Adelaide and Brisbane had 4. You could certainly mount an argument that we're deserving of having 4 in there, but ultimately, look, it's not what matters. We've got such a good, even team that perform week in, week out, so I don't think they're going to be too concerned by only quote unquote having 3 in the All-Australian side, because ultimately this side has carried us to the premiership, so it doesn't actually matter at the end of the day. And I don't have it in me to get too concerned by those kind of things, because it just doesn't matter ultimately. Like to the players, I'm sure it does individually, but to us as fans, we want our side to do well and to win premierships, and that's what we've done. So yeah, super effort from Garner and Riddell and O'Loughlin to make the All-Australian side, and yeah, I mean O'Loughlin in particular, just so exciting at such a young age to be such a dangerous small forward threat. I think we've got a lot to look forward to with her. So next week, there is no game. That's your season done. That's the men's program done, the women's program done. I'm recording this the day after, so we're actually in December now. We're in summer, so that the AFL season is well and truly over. I do think it's probably worth noting that although this season's just finished up, the player movement dates for the AFLW are about to happen. So the most significant ones, Wednesday, December 4, restricted free agency and the delisted free agency period opens up, so there could be some player movement there. And then the trade period opens up Thursday, December 5, so it's pretty quickly after the grand final. We saw last year that Livy Birch was signed pretty quickly after the AFL grand final, and this is why the trade period happens pretty quick. There's a week essentially for those two things to happen, because Wednesday, December 11 is when all three of those things close up. And there's some rookie signing and a second delisted free agent period. There's a few subsequent periods, but the main trade and free agency period is that Thursday, December 5 to Wednesday, December 11. And then the draft is Monday, December 16 for the AFLW draft. Then there'll be some SSP periods in February. But they're your main dates for when we could potentially look at improving the list. It's going to be interesting to see if there are any retirements. We do know we've got a couple of players that are coming towards the end. You think of Sheila and Emma Kearney. I have absolutely no whispers, and I hope they go around again. But we've got a couple of players that potentially could decide to hang up the boots, and we need to look at replenishing them in some way. But we also know we've got some really strong players that are waiting in the wings that just haven't been able to get their opportunity this year. So we'll wait and see what could happen in those periods across December. And then, I guess that's going to do us most likely for the year. I am still awaiting the birth of my first child, so I wasn't sure I was going to be able to get to the game. I was able to because he's decided not to come yet. So we will see what the next few weeks brings. If I can, I will try and squeeze out a bit of a season review for the AFLW. But things might get away from me. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be doing another podcast in the next little while or not. I'm giving myself the permission to not do that if life is a little bit tricky for now. So potentially a season review, we'll just have to wait and see if I'm able to do that. Otherwise, if not, I will be back next year in some capacity. I'll take a little bit of time off over summer, and I'd expect to be back late Jan, early Feb, hopefully, if everything's going well in my life, at least. We know that the AFL pre-season matches tend to be happening in February, and the real, I guess, I think it's sort of, everyone feels like it's football time once the Australian Open wraps up. I think that's when people turn their attention to footy. So, we'll look forward to getting back on the podcast around that time. If this is it for the year, thanks so much for your support, in particular through this AFLW period where we've had so much success. It's been tremendous to follow a side that's actually having some success. Hopefully the men's program can replicate a little bit of this during next season. It's been a fantastic batch of North Pod, so I really appreciate everyone who's listened. Just again, so excited that we have won the premiership, the first AFLW Premiership for North Melbourne, and hopefully not the last silverware that we're going to win in the next little while. Just a real privilege to be there, and thanks for taking the time out of your day to listen to me talk about some people running around kicking a footy around, because I love watching it, and hopefully I assume that you do as well. So thank you again for listening. I hope that you have a great week, have a great summer if I'm not back, and until next time, go North. Thanks for listening to another episode of North Pod. If you give me a rating or review on your podcast service, that would be much appreciated. And please follow me on all social media at North Pod Show. I'm on X, or Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and I'm also very active on the North Melbourne subreddit. Hope you'll join me for the next episode.